Welcome back. This is lecture 3, module 1, lecture 3. In lecture 1 and 2, we have seen in lecture 1, we have looked at the linguistic perspective on the interaction between language and society, and thereby we discussed about the sociology of language as well as sociolinguistics. In lecture 2, we have talked about the social origin of language in terms of social contract theory of Thomas Hobbes, Locke and Rousseau. Now, we will look at a few more scholars in similar line with some, of course, some differences. So, we will talk about Condillac, Vico and Herder today. This is in continuation with the social understanding of language. These are not linguistic perspective, but more of sociological, social, or you can even say anthropological, because Herder brings in the cultural anthropological angle. So, Condillac again in the same time frame 18th century. So, he was an 19th century philosopher known for his radical theory of which is called sensationalism. Basically, he talks about the senses as being an important part of our knowledge system, how senses. So, empiricism basically, so getting your ideas from the experiences. So, what is it is not abstract. If you recall, this is also in the same line of the mind body dualism. Already there was this debate was going on, it is also fits in. So, Condillac posited that all language, knowledge and identity stems from sensory input, challenging the notion of innate ideas and viewing the mind as a blank slate. Tabula rasa has been talked about by many scholars around that time. The mind is blank, it is tabula rasa, it is something that is blank, and you can through experiences you can add more knowledge to it, and thereby you, so whatever you become is an ultimate result of your experiences. So, Condillac is another important scholar in that trajectory who have challenged the idea of the innate ideas, that we are born with ideas. So, senses gives rise to knowledge is what his primary standpoint is. So, he has this very famous statue thought experiment that where he illustrates this. So, if you gradually add senses to the statue, and eventually how touch and other senses will particularly enables the coherent understanding of object and space. So, as you add more and more senses, your knowledge system gets more and more rich, and you start having understanding of objects and things. So, he further explores how attention, memory and language develop from these, all these today are understood, well understood, but this is one of the earlier theorists who talked about this attention, memory, language, they develop from these basic sensations. So, sensory perception giving rise to your understanding of multiple things, which in turn interacts with attention, memory and other higher functions, higher mental functions basically. So, with language being crucial for higher cognitive abilities and social interaction. So, basically we are talking about embodiment. Later on what we understood as embodied cognition versus symbolic cognition, this is where we can trace the history. So, two of his most important contribution in this regard is the essay on the origin of human knowledge and essay on the origin of language. So, 1746. So, focused on language as emerging from human needs and sensations, stressing its role in thought and reasoning. So, the development of language is directly connected to the social interactions as well as from human understanding, human sensory inputs, perception, that is how he connected. So, the main tenets of his theory was that language originated in and from natural condition. Language originated with the beginning of a species. In the beginning it was more of cries of passion. You can see the parallel between Condillac and the previous scholars that we talked about. As language progressed and cultivated, such cries were replaced by arbitrary spoken signs. So, we started with natural emotional outbursts, which later on became more sophisticated, more cultivated, and also society was also, as we went from primitive to the cultured state, this also changed. So, eventually giving rise to what we today see as arbitrary spoken signs. That is what language means today, but it started as primitive cries. So, this resulted in more arbitrary and abstract form of language. Hence, language can be a measure of the level of civilization. So, higher the civilization, higher the use of abstract understanding and the arbitrary nature of language. So, that is how the parallel is. So, his key concepts and ideas about language can be put together like this. So, first one is the origin in natural science. These are initial, often instinctive expressions such as cries, gestures and facial expressions. This is what other scholars before him also have said. So, a baby crying when hungry, someone flinching instinctively when from danger, these are initial the cries of passion as he called. So, these are natural signs. This is how it all began, and then shaped by experience and association. Now, these seemingly simple natural signs are not purely instinctive. Experience and association often shapes them. So, even though the first cry might be instinctive, you do not really plan it out, but eventually over time the baby's cry, which is initially a physiological response, it becomes associated with the relief of being fed or held, transforming into a way of communicating a need. So, it starts as an instinctive cry. Over time, as it becomes more and more kind of stabilized between the stimulus and response, the connection become more stabilized, this becomes a form of communication. So, it eventually becomes a kind of a sign, kind of an arbitrary sign over a period of time. He also talks about language of action. As individuals interact with others, these natural signs become more intentional and organized. So, over a period of time things change, leading to what he calls the language of action. So, language, this is another stage. So, stage by stage language and its function changes, starting with the very primitive to eventually more and more complicated. So, this stage, the language of action stage, involves deliberate communication, where individuals might point to the source of pain and use gestures and expressions to convey the specific meaning. So, here the language in action, language of action is the second stage of the development towards more and more complicated system. Then this is stepping stone to spoken and written language. So, language of action is the crucial stepping stone to spoken language, because that is where you are beginning to make the connection. So, this is the stimulus, this is how I will talk about it, or how I will formulate it, this is what it means. That connection, once that connection has been established, this eventually will open the path for further the spoken language and the written language. So, as people become more adept at communicating through actions, they develop more complex signs. This is a trial and error, through trial and error method this is achieved, eventually leading to the emergence of spoken words and subsequently written language. So, that is how he understands it. Now, also here, while this entire thing is going on, the role of social interaction is also very crucial, because for you to establish certain sign as an icon, let us say in the beginning, let us say it was iconic, eventually it becomes symbolic. So, during the iconic stage, there has to be an agreement. Remember, Hobbes also talked about the agreement, that how do you know that what I mean by x is also the same meaning that is conveyed by y. Now, this is established through social interaction. This is what Condillac also talks about. So, Condillac's theory highlights the critical role of social interaction in language development. He argued that language does not develop in isolation, but rather emerges from our fundamental need to communicate. Until and unless your hearer understands what you speak, there is absolutely no use of language. So, this is where the important part of social interaction comes in. So, because we understand, because we create that kind of a middle ground, we kind of create a common platform between or among all the members of a society. Hence, the meaning generation is an integral part of social interaction. So, that is how we arrive at it, and eventually this enables higher cognitive abilities. So, language is seen as the key that unlocks higher levels of thought in humans. So, Condillac attributed unique human capabilities such as morality, abstract reasoning, and even the knowledge of God. All of these were tied to our advanced language skills and capacity for reflection, because language also helps you in turn, because once you have created a system, a symbolic system, this now helps you to reflect. So, it increases your capacity for reflections, it increases your capacity for thought, increases your capacity for higher various other kinds of higher mental activities, including your thought about morality. Distinguishing human from animals, this is again the same thing that others have also talked about. While he acknowledged that animals possess basic reflection and habit formation, animals also do have some amount of habit formation. He noted the limitations in their minds because they do not have language. So, believing they are primarily driven by immediate need and sensory capabilities, particularly touch. Thus, language is what truly sets humans apart, allowing us to develop higher cognitive abilities. So, all the other animals, by virtue of them not having a symbolic structure in terms of a language kind of a symbolic structure, they are devoid of those higher mental capacities. And then eventually language becomes a tool for progress of the human society in general. So, beyond individual thought, Condillac viewed language as a powerful tool for analyzing ideas, because once you have language, you are capable of reflecting, you are capable of analyzing, you are capable of having higher thoughts. So, naturally this is behind progress of arts and civilization. So, it enables humans to form communities, build cultures and pass knowledge across generations. So, basically language is at the very root of creating cultured societies. That is what the idea is. That is what Condillac said. Another important name from the time is that of Vico, Giambattista Vico. So, he is an Italian philosopher. He is best known for his work The New Science 1725. He emphasized the historical and cultural evolution of language, myth and human societies. So, similar lines. So, this is his philosophy of language developed from poetic and metaphorical beginning. That is how he understood language, the beginning of language. He was a critique of the Cartesian rationalism, the mind body dualism that we talked about before, and was a proponent of the concept verum factum, suggesting that true knowledge comes from creation and experience rather than abstract reasoning. So, again sensory, you have experiences, sensory experiences of various kinds, and through which you create knowledge, rather than having true knowledge does not come to you as a given, it is not already there. You are not hardwired with the true knowledge, that knowledge comes through experiences, that is the idea. So, not merely as a tool for communication, language is not just a tool of communication, but as a window into the human mind. What all these ideas are today are taken for granted. So, we can talk about Vico talking about language as a reflection of the mind, what we think is reflected through our language, and also reflection of how we make sense of the world. So, the world view, the way each language posits or reflects the understanding of the world in a particular way. So, this is also another thing that he talked about in his The New Science. Language's development is intimately tied to the stages of social development, again echoing the similar kind of understanding as the previous scholars that we have talked about. So, development of language and development of society go hand in hand. As long as you do not have a very complex language system, you probably cannot have ability to think complex things, and as a result society will not develop, as that is how the simple correlation is. And so, he talks about the development of human society, the evolution as the ages of gods, heroes and men, very interesting take. So, his perspective on the origin of language is rooted in the poetic origin of society. He argued that early humans, whom he referred to as sublime poets, early humans were poets according to him. This also is similar to the musical theory of language evolution. So, initial language was musical, it was melodic, people sang their expressions, sang their feelings. Something similar he also talks about, that they were initially they were all poets, used language to comprehend the world long before sophisticated philosophical systems emerged. They achieved this by explaining the world through myth, metaphor and stories. So, the role of myths and metaphors and stories is beyond the immediate purpose, but also because they codify the understanding of the world in simplistic terms, in poetic ways, in metaphorical ways. So, that is what he talks about. So, he suggests that suggests a poetic way of thinking was the foundation of human understanding, precursor to philosophy itself. So, philosophy started much later. In the way fables and mythologies and various other such stories, legends created an understanding. So, they encapsulated the understanding, broader understanding of the world through those texts. So, that is how, through those creations, that is how humans, this is how philosophy was probably later on started. So, the three ages of man, as societies progress through historical ages, language also undergoes a transformation according to him, and Vico divided it in three ways. So, age of God, age of heroes and age of men. Age of God is the first one. It is primarily, language is primarily poetic, full of metaphor and imagery. In this stage, knowledge is deeply intertwined with religion in the beginning and superstition, and the natural world is imbued with spirits and gods. This is the initial stage of human societies. So, this is when you do not have the reason part is not there. So, religion and superstition, the natural world is full of spirits and other things. So, and this is the situation where language is full of metaphor and imagery. This is followed by the age of heroes. So, here language becomes more rhetorical. This reflects a world where figures embody strength and cunning, and aristocratic republics began to form with laws based on the power of the heroic class. So, the powerful, the martial race is what created the societies. Basically, the strength was one of the foundations on which societies were built. So, that is why age of heroes. So, heroes created societies. Then comes the age of men. So, here language becomes abstract and analytical. This age sees reason and reflection take the center stage. Now, we are not anymore focused on physical strength, we are not dependent on heroes to create societies or to create kingdoms or whatever, maintain them, but now we are using the power of mind, using our power of thought, power of analytical precision, all of that becomes center stage now. So, this is the age of men. With the rise of, this is when philosophy, science and democracy, all of these develop. So, this is the age of men, that is, so this is the last stage, final stage, when you can say that you are fully developed, your society is sophisticated enough, cultured enough. So, we have come a long way from the beginning. So, age of gods is the largely you can have a comparison between age of God and the natural state of being, that is what Hobbes talked about, something similar. So, here the language is more poetic, more direct maybe, but the end of it, end stage is the age of men, when higher thinking is the one that rules societies, on the basis of which you have science, technology, philosophy and democracy. Our third scholar today is Herder. Herder again is a towering figure in the domain of philosophy. He was a Prussian philosopher. At his time, Germanic people were scattered. So, his contribution is immense in many domains of course, but in primarily in case of German and the German identity, German culture, German language, he has had enormous influence. So, at that time the German people were scattered across different places and did not have a nation state. So, his work on German folk poetry, music and stories greatly influenced the Germans of that time. He inspired his people to speak in German. So, the German nationalism that became a very important thing in later time goes back all the way to Herder's work. So, this is the time when he talked about the language and its culture and its history, heritage and so on. So, basically he has contributed in creating the German identity, because that time nation state, German nation state was not there. So, he was he is part of a very important and very impressive lineage. So, he was taught by Immanuel Kant and also influenced by Spinoza and Leibniz. In his turn, he influenced many other important scholars, for example, Nietzsche and Coleridge, Mill, Humboldt, many others. Like it is a very important lineage of towering scholars. So, he is one of them. He is considered to be the founding father of various academic disciplines like anthropology, linguistics and hermeneutics. So, this is the text that we are interested in, is on the origin of language. This is 1772. This is a book where he talks about, this is a treatise on the origin of language, explains how languages began, why it is uniquely human. You see the same the same thread going across scholars and how it is tied to culture and thought. So, he strongly rejects the idea that language is divine or purely instinctive, and argues that it is a natural human creation shaped by reason, emotion and society. That is why we are talking about him. So, language is an integral part of society as a construct, and it is created human, it is a human creation rather than a divinely ordained kind of a capacity. Language is the organ of thought, this is how he put it. This is a trait that distinguishes humans from other animals. So, humans are the only species that can adapt to any environment by altering their culture. That is why humans do not have a habitat. We humans can go anywhere and make it their own. So, reason and language are two sides of the same human characteristic feature, that language from without is the true differential character of our species, as reason is from within. So, language is on the outside, reason is from the inside. These are the two things that make humans unique, that is what separates us from the rest of the animal world. He also popularized the idea of cultural plurality, and he was one of the first proponents of the idea that language might be an indicator of the character of a culture. That is why he focused on German language as an important indicator of the German identity. So, here is his philosophy and legacy. He talked about people, folk constitute the life spirit of a nation, hence the people who are conquered by alien cultures resulting in the loss of their own language tend to lose their identity. In this course, we will discuss at length about how language and identity go hand in hand, how language is an important marker of your identity. Again, this is also something that we can trace back all the way to Herder and his work. So, he talked about how losing your language is akin to losing your identity. When you are conquered by a separate different kind of people, different race, he calls them alien cultures, that is when you lose your identity. He was and as a result of which he was anti-imperialism. So, he was completely anti-imperialist because he thought imperialism destroys the essence of a culture through the imposition of different language and other practices. That is something a colonized erstwhile colonized country like India understands very well, and this is what he talked about as well. So, he was against the other philosophers who supported imperialism, like for example, Voltaire. Cultural identity, again it is a part and parcel of the same idea. He was against migration also. So, not only he does not like imperialism where one country, one culture, one group of people goes and conquers another and imposes their ideas, he also was against migrating out of their own country. So, for example, at that time, because he was primarily focused on the Germans, so at that time German soldiers were used by the British imperial war in far away America. Germans were being sent to America to fight for the British. So, Herder's philosophy put emphasis on language as part of a cultural identity. Why are Germans going out and so you are losing your identity, you are going to far away land and fighting for somebody else. So, the entire idea of the identity as of a group, of a culture, of a nation is strongly tied to the the allegiance to or the loyalty to one's language. So, that is what Herder's philosophy primarily talked about. So, in short we can in nutshell we can say, of course, Herder has been studied from n number of perspectives. He is also considered to be in fact, this is before him anthropology as a discipline was considered to be more akin to medical science and anatomy and stuff. He was one who brought it closer to culture, and anthropology became cultural anthropology often is traced back to him. So, he brought it together, anthropology became part of cultural inquiry. So, his philosophy put emphasis on language as part of cultural identity of a group of people. That is what is the most important part for us, because we are discussing these philosophers, they are not from linguistics. We are looking at the social origin of language and how from the Renaissance time in the western philosophical tradition, from the Renaissance time, how language has been understood to be part and parcel of the social structure, how societies came into being, how language played an important part of it within that entire broad system, and how language can play a part in creating cultural identity as well. So, all of these things we will eventually be exploring in this entire course. That is why we are introducing all these ideas and tracing their history all the way back to Renaissance time. So, different cultures tend to coincide with different languages. So, this is what his primary take was. So, this is where we complete lecture 3. In the next lecture, we will talk about some more philosophers and thinkers. Thank you.